Inflation is not just controlled by central banks. It is controlled by ports, shipping routes, and data networks most people never see. Over the last 2 decades, China quietly built the operating system behind global trade, a physical internet capable of influencing prices, supply chains, and economic stability across the world. This is the hidden infrastructure shaping the 21st century economy. When you hear the word inflation, what do you picture? You probably imagine men and women in tailored suits sitting in a boardroom in Washington or Frankfurt. You picture the chairman of the Federal Reserve stepping up to a podium, announcing a quarter-point interest rate hike, and magically pulling the levers of the global economy. We've been conditioned to believe that inflation is purely a monetary phenomenon, that it's created by central banks printing too much money and cured by central banks raising the cost of borrowing. We look at global trade and think of it as this frictionless, invisible cloud, a free market where goods just magically float across neutral oceans to arrive exactly when we need them. But here is the crazy part. The math tells a completely different story. If you look at the data from the San Francisco Federal Reserve, the massive inflation spikes that crippled the United States in 2021 and 2022 weren't just about stimulus checks or the money printer. According to their research, supply chain disruptions and surging logistics costs were responsible for exactly 60% of that US inflation surge. 60%. The decisions made in Washington were ultimately being overpowered by the delays of cargo ships thousands of miles away. The reality we need to wake up to is this: the global economy is not a cloud. It is a rigid, physical pipeline. And today, the inflation rates in the West, the prices on your supermarket shelves, and the availability of critical components aren't just controlled by bankers. They are controlled by the speed of massive 5G connected port cranes managed from Shanghai and the algorithms of Chinese data networks that process global trade in real time. Everyone thinks China became a superpower simply by building factories and providing cheap labor. The truth is much more systemic. They didn't just build the factories, they built the operating system of the physical internet. And in doing so, they have quietly engineered an invisible switch. A switch that can dictate Western macroeconomic policy without firing a single shot. This isn't theory, this is system architecture. Let's break down exactly how they hack the supply chain. To understand this leverage, we have to look at the anatomy of how a single product, say a semiconductor or a shipment of raw lithium, actually enters the Western market. It is a 3-step domino effect: ownership, hardware, and software. Let's start with step 1, ownership. The Trojan horse at the gates. If you want to control the flow of the physical internet, you don't need to conquer countries. You just need to own the nodes, the ports. For years, the Chinese state-owned shipping giant COSCO has been quietly acquiring massive stakes in European infrastructure. Look at Greece. COSCO doesn't just operate there. They hold a 67% majority ownership stake in the port of Piraeus. By injecting capital and Chinese logistics models, they transformed Piraeus from a standard Mediterranean dock into Europe's 4th busiest port. From there, they expanded their network, taking control of terminals in Valencia and Bilbao in Spain, Zeebrugge in Belgium, and securing strategic minority stakes in Rotterdam and Antwerp. But the real wake-up call happened in Germany in 2022 and 2023. COSCO attempted to buy a 35% stake in the container terminal Tollerort in Hamburg. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a test of European sovereignty. Based on a deep dive report by the London School of Economics, the German government finally recognized the national security threat. They intervened and forcefully capped COSCO's share at 24.9%, a sub 25% stake specifically designed to strip the Chinese firm of any operational control or strategic veto power. Germany realized what the rest of the world is just waking up to. Port stakes are no longer just commercial real estate. They are the ultimate geopolitical defense lines. But ownership is only the first layer. Let's move to step 2, hardware. The Trojan horse inside the gates. Let's say a European or American port remains fully domestically owned. Who is lifting the cargo? If you walk into almost any major US port today, you will see massive ship-to-shore cranes built by a Chinese state-owned company called ZPMC. According to a September 2024 investigation by the U.S. House Select Committee on the CCP, ZPMC manufactures nearly 80% of the cranes operating in U.S. ports. For decades, we thought of these cranes as dumb iron, giant metal arms that just lift heavy boxes. But modern ZPMC cranes are highly sophisticated edge computing devices. During the congressional investigation, authorities discovered something that wasn't in the contracts: undocumented cellular modems installed directly onto the cranes. These modems bypass local port security firewalls, possessing the capability to transmit telemetry and logistical data straight back to China. These aren't just cranes. They are an army of physical sensors. They know exactly who is importing what, whether it's commercial goods or military cargo, down to the exact millisecond. Which brings us to step 3, software, the all-seeing eye. What happens to all this data? It feeds into the ultimate software layer, LOGINK. LOGINK is a national transportation and logistics public information platform supported by the Chinese Ministry of Transport. It aggregates data from shipping lines, customs networks, rail operators, and those very same port sensors. Today, LOGINK has visibility into nearly half of the world's global cargo flow. It tracks the global supply and demand map in real time. If there is a shortage of critical minerals in Germany or an excess of grain in the US, LOGINK's API processes that data before Western markets even realize the shift. The threat is so severe that in December 2023, President Biden signed the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024, which explicitly prohibited the U.S. military and strategic commercial ports from using the LOGINK system. But for much of the global supply chain, the network is already deeply embedded. When you combine COSCO's European terminal ownership, ZPMC's 80% hardware monopoly, and LOGINK's software dominance, you don't just have a shipping company. You have a fully integrated end-to-end simulation of the world economy. So, why does this matter? What is the macro strategic impact of owning the physical internet? It comes down to one word: leverage. The Western corporate world has spent the last 40 years optimizing for efficiency. We built the just-in-time manufacturing model to keep warehouse costs low, meaning factories and retailers only order components exactly when they need them. It's highly profitable when the oceans are calm, but it makes the West terrifyingly fragile. In a system optimized to the absolute limit, speed is everything, and whoever controls the speed controls the economy. Here is where the math gets genuinely frightening. In February 2026, the International Monetary Fund published a study utilizing AI's maritime tracking data across 93 ports. They wanted to measure the exact relationship between port delays and our wallets. Their findings? A mere 100-hour delay in shipping at the ports translates to a direct 0.5 percentage point increase in consumer price inflation, exactly 5 months later. Let that sink in. Just 4 days of logistical friction equals 0.5% of macro-level inflation down the line. This is the bullwhip effect in its purest, most weaponized form. Now place that power in the hands of a geopolitical rival. China doesn't need to threaten military blockades to hurt a Western economy. Through its integrated network of AI-managed ports, hardware dominance, and data platforms, it can simply slow things down. A firmware update on a crane, a routing optimization algorithm that delays containers by a week, a sudden data blackout. By applying a few days of friction to the global supply chain, they can artificially trigger a massive inflation shock in the United States or Europe months later. They have the power to force the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates. They have the power to cool down Western economies without ever crossing a border. Inflation is no longer just an economic metric. It is a geopolitical weapon. In the 21st century, the definition of power isn't just what you produce. It is how fast you can move it and how quickly you process its data. The nations and corporations that survive the next decade will be the ones that understand this vulnerability. The era of blind globalization is over. The only way to dismantle this invisible switch is through aggressive friendshoring, bringing critical supply chains closer to home and treating port infrastructure not as commercial real estate, but as national security fortresses. Those who fail to adapt will find their economies permanently tethered to the operational speed of their rivals. In this new world, wars aren't fought with artillery. They are fought at the choke points of the supply chain. Don't just watch the game, understand it.